Hey, good morning, everyone. Josh is Severe Weather. Happy Monday to you. We are rounding out the month of October with quite a bit still some action here in the tropics, close to land around Central America into the Caribbean Sea. And then some big temperature changes coming for the South and Eastern United States and winter weather for the northern tier over the next several days. So we're at the time of the year where the weather can change on a dime, and we can see quite a bit of extreme as still some summer temperatures linger in the southern U.S. Much colder air from Canada and the northern portions of the world comes on down, and we start taking a look at some more challenging forecasts. So we're going to talk tropics first, then I'm going to wrap things up with what's going on in the US and Canada. I'm going to share my screen with you and welcome here. We do have growing concern in the Caribbean. Now, this has been a tricky kind of a forecast period here in the Caribbean. A couple of systems we've been watching haven't really developed, but we are looking at a growing chance for something to move across the Caribbean and develop in the Western Caribbean very late this week into next weekend, something we need to watch in Central America, as well as in the Yucatan and Cuba and the Northwest Caribbean. So that is what I'll talk about in this video. We do have an invest, which yesterday showed some gradual signs of organization. The next name on the list is Vince. Well, the National Hurricane Center and aircraft went in there and were not convinced. Get it? But we do have a new tropical storm in the Pacific. This is Pilar, and it is threatening the west coast of Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. But looks like it's going to just kind of flirt with the coast and then get pushed back out to sea and not be a threat to land here in a couple of days, which is some better news, certainly. So here's a look at the latest map. This is Invest 96L, just a very marginal chance of developing. While this is not going to be a brand name system by any stretch, what's going to happen is it's going to get absorbed by a bigger system moving through the eastern US and very quickly race across the North Atlantic and become an issue for Western Europe here in a few days. I'm going to talk a little more about Europe than I usually do because we're in a very active stretch of weather in that part of the world. Here's Tropical Storm Pilar, now not expected to become a hurricane. A few days ago, it looked like it had a chance, but wind shear has been a little bit stronger. As a result, it's taken a little bit too long to develop to get to that point. But nonetheless, we do have to keep an eye on it in El Salvador and on the Pacific coast here for some localized fringe effects. But the area that we do need to keep a closer eye on is in a hot spot in this time of the year in the Caribbean. Very warm waters that really have not been touched yet. As this wave breaks off from 96L and moves west, it's got a moderate chance of becoming a named system here by the weekend. And I think, honestly, I think it's going to be a higher chance than what this is showing. We're just kind of getting ourselves stepped up in that general direction. And here's a look at what's going on in the world. So you can see really most of the action is in the Atlantic and Pacific closer to land. The remains of Tammy no longer an issue. 96L we're watching, but these are the storms we're going to keep an eye on. I think we're going to have Invest 97L in a few days. Here is Pilar, and you can see that system came from a depression that hit Nicaragua a week ago, crossed into the Pacific, has done a little bit of a loop, and now is expected to be a stronger tropical storm, then heading back out to sea. There's another invest that has a very low chance of developing. And then in the rest of the world, things are not super busy. We do have an area to keep an eye on with low development chances east of the Philippines. And we're keeping an eye on things east of Somalia and Africa. But I don't think either of those systems is going to be a major system at this point. So here's a look at our infrared. You can see things are spinning here in the Western Atlantic, in the Pacific, and in the Caribbean, as well as in the intertropical convergence zone. Doesn't look super active at first look, but these are certainly areas that have potential with them here in the next couple of days. In the far Atlantic, things are quieting down, so that is good news. We're seeing way too much wind shear, but as we get closer to Puerto Rico and into east of the Bahamas, those are the areas I'm a little bit more concerned with here. I'm going to show you kind of two different centers here that we're keeping an eye on. This right here is 96L, and you can see just does not look like it's going to organize at this point. The actual low-level center is here east of the Bahamas, and what's going to happen is it's going to turn away quickly as a front drops down in this direction here tomorrow into Wednesday. There's a lot of thunderstorm activity on the southern side of it. Unfortunately, that means heavy rain for portions of Puerto Rico, eastern Hispaniola, continuing here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But what's happening here is this piece is going to hang around into a spot where wind shear should weaken some. And we're going to have to keep an eye on it as it heads in this direction here towards the end of this week and into the next weekend, as we may have our next developed system somewhere in here. And there's kind of two paths it could take. One, it could continue into Nicaragua here. We've seen that happen. 2020, we had two major storms go in that direction. But the other possibility is that it hangs out around the coast and finds its way up into the Northwest Caribbean into here. And that's where we have to be a little bit more concerned, even in South Florida, but more so for the Yucatan, as well as for Western and Central Cuba. Because what's going to happen is we're going to continue to have fronts moving down into the Gulf, and those are going to kind of suppress action as it comes down in this way. You see there's a bit of a spin in here right now. That just does not have a lot of future to it, unfortunately, if you're a tropical fan, which I mean, I am. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing this if I weren't, but fortunately for most of us, not a big deal at this point. Really, everything to be concerned with is on the Pacific side for the time being, as we do have Tropical Storm Pilar circulating in here off of the coast of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. There is a tropical storm watch for this area. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be watching for you all here in the coming days. Here's a look at the water vapor image. You can see very clearly that upper low, which is spinning west across the Gulf. You see this circulation here over the areas east of the Bahamas with our invest. And then we don't see anything at this point spinning up over the Caribbean, but we have to watch it as things continue to move westward into more favorable environment for development. Here's a look at Invest 96L real quick. You can see the Bahamas are kind of getting spared any major convection. We just don't have enough of a low-level center for this to really get its next name. So we're unlikely to see Vince. Yesterday at this time, there was a little more future involved than what I think we have today. And if you see on the infrared, you see kind of an area of thunderstorms that's trying to go up and develop, but it's just not really happening. So this is not a threat to any major land masses at this point. But what will happen is it will merge with a system moving off the East Coast. And you can see some very intense potential pressure and wind as this moves towards Western France and Southwestern England and Southern Ireland here later in the week, around Wednesday into Thursday. Here's a look at where things are likely to develop. You can see this area is fading. This is Pilar. This is the invest in the Pacific. Here's our new area, though, that we need to keep an eye on. It just pops up here south of Hispaniola on Wednesday and tracks westward. We now have a 50% chance or greater of a tropical depression by Thursday south of Jamaica, and then a high chance for something Friday that's aimed towards Nicaragua and Honduras. And that could potentially come on shore here over the weekend, but it also could potentially slide up into the Northwestern Caribbean. At that point, we certainly need to keep a closer eye on things. If it goes right into Central America, obviously things are going to be bad there with lots of rain coming, but that's better news for the Yucatan, for Cuba, for South Florida. But we just can't close that door yet. We don't know until it develops where exactly it's going to go. So I want to show you something interesting here. This is our Invest 96L, and you can see it's pulling away from the Bahamas this morning and going to turn northeast. The leftover center here gets absorbed by a front, which is going to deepen very quickly northwest of the Bahamas tonight. And take a look at how this ends up tracking across the North Atlantic. We see deepening low pressure, and unfortunately we lose it, but this is coming into the UK here later in the week. Looking at the GFS, though, you do get a feel for what's coming through here. This is 96L, gets absorbed by a storm system, develops east in Newfoundland, and then very quickly races towards Europe here and deepens the entire way. 963 millibars crashing into France here as a powerful gale system here by early on Saturday, European time. And that is going to be preceded by a powerful storm, which is developing now and moving across. So Europe is about to get battered here, kind of a 1-2 punch over the upcoming week. So if you have family and friends out there, if you happen to be watching, do be preparing for this potentially busy period. Now you see here in the Southwestern Caribbean, this is South Central Caribbean, but Southwestern Caribbean, we do have a system that's deepening. And the GFS says it could become a hurricane approaching Nicaragua. Now, the GFS gets very aggressive very quickly here. The other models do not show that, but it is an area I'm going to be watching. A couple of model runs ago, it showed this, but a little bit farther to the north and trying to escape into the Northwest Caribbean and eventually get picked up to the right, moving northeast, and then kind of moving around. Now, the trend is certainly more favorable to see something that stays in the Caribbean and does not come up towards Florida like this previous run of the GFS, which showed a powerful storm moving by on the 7th and 8th of November. The GFS is losing that idea now, keeping it weaker in the Caribbean, which I think is going to be more correct, but we just can't rule out yet that possibility of something coming through Cuba. So keep an eye on South Florida. We're not saying this is going to hit you guys. I know there have been scary model runs over the weekend, but those are no longer showing up. So right now I'm certainly more in tune with the trend here. I like the trend, but we do still need to keep an eye on things until we know exactly what will happen. Looking at Western Europe, we see just an amazing set of circumstances here with 1, 2, 3 storms moving in over the second half of the week, producing 200-kilometer-per-hour wind here over southwestern portions of England, over northwestern France, over the English Channel. It's going to be very rough for these folks. We'll see destructive wind and destructive waves for some of these areas as this storm wraps up. And then here's 96L, another gale storm that follows almost the exact same track coming through here early on Saturday. So a very active pattern coming for Western Europe. So they're kind of getting remnant systems that just blow up with the jet stream here over the subtropics. Here's a look at the HAFS. It was tracking 96L, but then it kind of loses it here, as you can imagine, by Tuesday night, early Wednesday. And then you can see it's picking up on the next system. It's coming close to Jamaica and Haiti here. This would be overnight Thursday night. Here's a look at Friday, tracking west-southwesterly and strengthening. And this is a tropics-specific model. It's not the GFS, which takes an idea and runs with it. This is something that's got a little bit more exact science into the actual tropical processes that are out there versus the global model. I know that sounds very confusing to a lot of you, but just this is designed for tropical genesis. The GFS is designed for hype, in my opinion, when you get longer into the range. But you can see it does have a tropical storm here aiming towards northern Nicaragua, southeastern Honduras. And the general track here is west or even west-southwest. So for a while, it may actually move kind of southwesterly. Then eventually it may get picked up by a trough and head more northwesterly into the Northwest Caribbean. So if you're in Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Belize, Yucatan, Jamaica, and Cuba, and the Cayman Islands, I think you all need to be watching this a lot more closely. We really haven't had much to watch yet this season. I think that is going to change here for the second part of this week and over the weekend. Here's the reason why. If you look at the wind shear forecast, you can see over a 5-day stretch towards this weekend, wind shear is lessening and significantly below average. When you start seeing these bluer colors, that indicates below average wind shear. And you can see those kind of take place here across all the Caribbean. We just don't have extremely high wind shear. So when wind shear is low and water temperatures are warm, we have more of a favorable environment for development. Now, the Gulf has very high wind shear. So on the northern Gulf Coast, Texas, northern Florida, the Southeast, you don't have to be concerned about anything tropical like this coming up. That wind shear would just eat it alive. But if you look at the Caribbean, that wind shear ribbon here is certainly on the lower than climatological mean side. And that means we can have more favorable conditions for development, assuming we do get a storm. Here's the latest GFS taking Pilar towards Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador here on Tuesday night, and then kicking it back out and actually weakening it, then developing low pressure closer to Colombia. And notice how the HAFS was closer to Jamaica. This one's farther south. With this, I would be less concerned in the Northwest Caribbean than I would the Southwest Caribbean. But the GFS intensifies this pretty significantly into a hurricane and drives it into Nicaragua here Saturday night, early Sunday, but then pulls it up towards Belize and the Yucatan early next week. And it may camp out for a little bit longer. Not coming up to the northern Gulf Coast, but may stick around in this area or even come up closer to the Florida Keys here. So we're going to keep an eye on that area for you guys. You can see one thing I will guarantee is that there is a lot of rain coming here over the upcoming week. And if you look at the forecast here, you see 50 inches as a max. You see these bright colors of 20 inches. There's a lot of off the charts rainfall totals. South Florida looks very dry. The northern Gulf and Southeast look seasonably wet. Texas is going to dry out, but look how wet the Caribbean is. These are insane numbers of rain. So Central America is going to be in for a stretch of flooding here in the next couple of weeks. Jamaica could have significant rain. The Cayman Islands, portions of Cuba, Haiti, Hispaniola, and Puerto Rico all stand the chance of seeing some potential flooding as we have multiple tropical bursts that are coming through until we get our named system potentially here later this week. Here's a look at the European ensemble. Kind of the same deal here. You just see things really coming together here near the coastline of Central America. This one only showing 40 inches of rain, but still that's a ton of rain. That's just over a 10 to 15 day stretch. And a lot of that is right along the coastline here. So we definitely need to be concerned with that. And then I'll show you the European ensembles real quick. You see Pilar here starting to make that turn here tomorrow night. Then you see development here somewhere in the Southwestern Caribbean Thursday and Friday. And generally speaking, a track west-southwest to west, but there are models that are starting or ensembles that are starting to turn it more to the northwest And there are even a few solutions showing it coming up through the Yucatan and Cuba here as we get to next week. So it may still be around here even in 10 days, just something that we have to keep an eye on. In the Pacific, disturbance here, Pilar here, but nothing else to really be concerned with. The good news about Pilar is that she is going to get kicked out to sea and not hit Mexico once again. So a few days ago, the models had more of a track to the northwest. Now they're bringing the front down faster. Pilar taking longer to get going. You see all this rain out here, but the good news is that things are going to get worse for a day and then get better after that as things kind of shift towards El Salvador and western parts of Honduras and Nicaragua. But the general track here is going to be back out to sea. As you can see, there's a loop and then things go back out to sea. These are not tropical forecasts. These are climatology, but typically speaking, a kickback to the west here starting on Wednesday morning. Intensity forecast, generally speaking, a tropical storm, and it may be one for a while, but then weakening some as wind shear picks up. And that is some better news here for the Pacific, which has had such an active October. All right, back into the U.S., we see a massive area of freeze warnings from Arizona, Nevada, through North Texas, all the way up into western and central Pennsylvania. It looks really destructive here. It is if you're a farmer and you're planning on still having a growing season, but all in all, it's actually going to be a pretty quiet weather pattern for the next few days across the U.S., aside from the freeze watches and warnings. We do have some winter weather advisories and winter storm warning for the Keweenaw Peninsula here, as well as an advisory in northern Maine, getting some early winter here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in coming slides. But I did want to show you the overall pattern showing this cold getting drilled down into the south and east, with places like Charlotte and Atlanta and Richmond seeing potentially our first freeze of the season here Wednesday night. Very cold, but it does transition to a milder pattern here at the end of this week. And over the weekend, we do warm up, but then there's more cold coming down next week. You can see a more active pattern here as systems drop down out of central Canada. The west is warm, but the east is chilly and potentially unsettled as we head towards Veterans Day here. So we will be watching. I'm looking at models that run 10, 15 days out, showing some interesting scenarios. I'm not really going to show those to you guys today because they're going to change. But do be prepared for more travel disruptions on the East Coast and in the Great Lakes as we get towards around the 8th to 15th of November. Here's our temperature forecast aloft, well below average across much of central and eastern Canada, the eastern and southern United States, milder than average in the west, and that does expand into the Great Lakes. We do warm up briefly here over the weekend, and then here comes our next shot of chill coming down here. Going to take a little bit of time, but you can see it coming down here towards the 9th and 10th of November. So we're going to be back and forth for a little bit longer here, which is interestingly different than what we saw last winter, where the cold just, it came and left. Here we've got more progressive cold coming down. So hopefully that's going to be the case this winter if you want to see snow. Now, looking at the big picture, Great Lakes is going to see some snow showers here. We're going to have some snow tomorrow night, places like Chicago and western and lower Michigan, even into the eastern Great Lakes. Some light rain moving through the Carolinas and southeast as this low pressure forms near the coast, but that's going to get kicked out to the sea, and much of the country is quiet except for the Pac Northwest here Wednesday into Thursday. Now that's going to change as we see kind of a clipper type system move through the northern U.S. We're going to see rain and some snow moving through the U.S.-Canadian border here through Sunday. It does warm up, but we see some light rain on the East Coast again on Sunday. It seems like that's our day for rain in the East. Then things quiet down again, and then we could be in for a more active pattern here next week, looking at the 8th, 9th, 10th, that time frame. So keep an eye on things here. Still a lot of uncertainty, but maybe a lot more moisture to deal with and more unsettled weather. Here's a look at our snow forecast over the next 2 days. We could see up to close to a foot on the Keweenaw, 3 to 6 inches on the rest of the Lake Superior shoreline, 2 to 3 off of Lake Michigan, and even in parts of Milwaukee and Chicago, a light accumulation of snow, locally up to 2 to 3 inches here in the next couple of days. Even places like Indianapolis, Dayton, and Cincinnati could see their first flakes of the season. I wouldn't call it a lot, but it could be enough to coat the ground here by Wednesday morning. Minnesota could see another couple of inches. Looking at the Northeast, we do see 3 to 6 inches across northwestern Maine, a couple of inches possible here through Wednesday morning over places in upstate New York, mainly in the Snowbelt region, but even western West Virginia or western Maryland, eastern West Virginia, over the Appalachians here, we do have some accumulating snow potential here, especially tomorrow night into early Wednesday. And I'm not going to leave you out in Canada either. We're going to see significant snow in New Brunswick, in Breton or PEI, all the way over to Cape Breton here, with the potential for 5 to 15 centimeters of snow over the next 48 hours. So winter is definitely coming, and it's coming fast here. Here's a look at temperatures. I showed you guys on my community page the temperature gradient we had in Texas. That gradient shifts eastward, and take a look here at the Carolinas today. 40s in the west, 70s and 80s in the east. Yeah, here it is. This is 5 o'clock today. 83 in Charlotte, 78 in Atlanta, 59 in Birmingham, 47 in Jackson, Mississippi. Get ready, it's coming. And that chill continues to build south and east. It'll stick around here through the end of the week. Moderating temperatures this weekend, though. We'll be back in the 50s and 60s in the Carolinas. That'll actually feel pretty nice, in my opinion. Texas back in the 60s and 70s here on Saturday. But there's more cold to come, and it is starting to invade central and eastern Canada here next week, and eventually that builds down into the Northeast and Great Lakes. Take a look at this chill that's building down into Minnesota. So we very much are seeing kind of an earlier start to winter than last year, but things are going to go back and forth for a while longer. Thank you all so much for your time today. I really appreciate you. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. I'm going to do my best to kind of respond to comments for any questions. Going to be pretty busy this week, just to be honest with you guys, with family things, with work. But I really do enjoy this calling that I have to help you guys make weather decisions and to be safe from the weather. I believe it's my calling from God. I truly, as a Christian human, believe I'm here to bless other people. This is kind of the gift I've been given. You may not believe that, but that's quite all right. But I did want to share that I can't do this without God. He is my creator. He's your creator. He's given us all these powers to make a difference in our short time on earth. He's also given us the opportunity to accept his son, Jesus Christ, as our savior, who can save us eternally and give us the hope of eternal life. That's the reason I became a Christian 10 years ago. I knew about it. Trust me, I knew there were people that were strong in their faith. I just hadn't picked up that spirit yet in my life. But thank God he didn't give up on me. He gave me the opportunity to accept him on my terms, on my time, and now I follow his laws. And I will say that a lot of us get restless. A lot of us feel weary. We wonder where God is in our life when we deal with these challenges. And I will say that God is very much working in us every day. Isaiah 40, 28 through 31. Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary, for there is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. There's one key phrase in there, and that is they that wait upon the Lord. The Lord waited for me until I finally accepted him and accepted Jesus as my savior. Now he wants me to wait upon the Lord and say, this is not microwave mentality. This is not, oh God, I expect this tomorrow. This is wait upon the Lord, and then he's going to do his things. We're not leaning on our own understanding. We're leaning on God's understanding and on God's time. But God will renew our strength as believers. And I wanted to share that news because that is what gives me hope. It's my father-in-law's favorite verse. It's one of my wife's favorite verses. It's waiting upon the Lord, learning to be patient and to ask God for his providence, and he will provide. He will provide, especially to those who are weary, those who are faint, those who feel powerless. However, God's power is mighty, and rather than telling God how big your problems are, we need to tell our problems how big our God is. Prayer is a very powerful weapon against the enemy's forces. When we talk to God and when God talks back with us, we overtake the evil that's out there in the world. So I encourage you, if you have a prayer request, I would love to take some time to pray for you today. Please feel free to list those in the comments. I'm happy to pray for you. If you would love to pray for me, I very much appreciate that as well. But I really do thank you all for your time today and look forward to connecting again tomorrow morning with another video. Have a blessed day. See y'all then. God bless you.